Hello everybody and welcome to our Tech Tuesday tutorials number 15. Today we're going into something a little bit different. We're going to be taking a look at a primer on media files. Basically we're going to go over some details of media files, of images and of video, and cover some of the basics of them, including file types, file size, what affects file size, and things like that. This may be basic information for some of you all, but for a lot of our users, they really just don't know this. No one's really taught them this. So this can be a very frustrating thing for people. They record video and it's too large for their device. They aren't really sure what these different file icons mean and things like that. I've had a lot of people come to me and ask about this, and I realized I should probably make a video about it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go into is file extensions. File extensions are basically the last name of a file. So let's say you have a file called resume. If it's a Word document, it's going to have .doc or .docx as its file extension. If you have an Adobe Acrobat document, it's going to have .pdf and so on. These extensions, these last names, these last three characters, tell the computer what program to use to handle them. It sets up file associations with the program. So the icon of the file is actually from the program itself that's used to open it, not necessarily the file itself. So for an example, if you have a PDF file and it's .pdf, it may look like the red Adobe icon if you have Adobe Acrobat installed on your computer, and that's the program that's associated with PDF files. However, if you install, let's say, Foxit Reader, it has a different icon, and if you install that on your computer, all of your PDF files might suddenly have a different icon because the icon is associated with a program that's using them. If you don't see your extensions, you can turn them on. Windows hides them by default. Basically, I can go into the instructions, but it just takes too long. Just go to Google and type in a search, C file extensions in Windows or C file extensions on Mac, and it'll give you instructions on how to turn that on so you can see them. Now, if you're using Google Drive, I will say this. You can rename your files in Google Drive, and that's kind of cool. Yeah, it's good. The problem is, when you rename them, it's easy to remove the file extension from the last name. So when you download that file, it's just going to be listed as some sort of unreadable file. So if you look over here, you'll see at the bottom, both of these are MP4 files, but the second one got renamed and it dropped the file extension. So Windows sees it as an unknown file type. It won't open it. It doesn't know how to handle that because it doesn't have a last name and thus can't be associated with the player that would play it. There's nothing wrong with the file. It's just been renamed so that the .mp4 is gone. So never remove the file extensions for any of your files, otherwise your computer won't know what to do with them. Right, so some common image extensions that you would see. JPEG is probably the most common. It's compressed images. Basically what it does is it compresses them, makes them smaller, but also throws away some information on them. The information is usually very minor and you don't notice it, in a photograph. But if you zoom in, you'll see it. I'll show you an example. The other one is PNG, and it's also very common. It's the most common without compression. The files are bigger, but they're a higher quality. It does support transparency, so you can have transparent parts of the image, so you can put it up on a website and you can see things behind it. But it really is best for flat colors because the files it makes are much bigger than JPGs. So if you're using logos and things like that, PNG is the best. GIF used to be very common, but it's actually beaten out by the PNG with one exception, and that's GIFs can support multiple frames, so they can do animation and stuff like that. And you might see animated pictures on the web. Those are GIFs most of the time. The next type is a BMP, and it's just a huge file. It doesn't offer any compression, which means it can make some gorgeous looking images, but honestly PNG beats it out for the most part. So here's an example. A JPEG at really low quality, really high compression, can start looking very distorted when you zoom in. Now this is zoomed in, and it is a really high compression, which most JPGs or JPEGs, also spelled JPEG, most of them are not at this level of compression. I did this to prove a point. On the right, you'll see the difference between a JPG at really high compression versus a PNG zoomed in. And you'll notice that the PNG handles flat colors much better. The JPG tends to produce a bit of artifacting and stuff like that. Now again, this is extreme cases, just to kind of prove a point. So as far as videos go, most common formats are listed here. You can pause this video and read all that if you like. The big takeaway here is that MP4 is probably the best balance of quality and size, but this tells you kind of where these things came from. I will say that Apple records mostly in MOVs, and they make some really nice looking videos, but with that high quality comes a price, and that's a very large file size. And not many things can open it without QuickTime or being on a Mac. So speaking of files, let's take a look at the common file size measurements. The most common things you'll see is byte, kilobyte, megabyte, and gigabyte in ascending order of size. Kilo means 1,000, and basically there's 1,000 bytes in a kilobyte. And thus mega means millions and giga means billions, so 1,000 kilobytes is a megabyte, 1,000 megabytes is a gigabyte, and so on and so forth. It keeps going higher, you get into terabytes and so on and so forth. But you'll mostly see megabytes and gigabytes. So an example here. 1.2 gigabytes is really 1,200 megabytes, which could be also 1,200,000 kilobytes, but you probably won't bother to translate that. You're really just going to go back and forth between megabyte and gigabyte. Just know that there's 1,000 megabytes in a gigabyte, and you'll be pretty set for most discussions on files. So how big is that, right? I mean, that doesn't mean much to me, right? So to give you an example, the maximum file size in Gmail is 25 megabytes. That's 0.25, a quarter of a gigabyte, not even a full gigabyte, right? A DVD holds 4.7 gigs, or if you're using a large capacity DVD, it's 8.5, but most are 4.7. Blu-ray discs hold about 25 gigabytes, or if you're doing the double capacity, 50 gigabytes. They do rarely go up to 128 gigabytes, but the most common ones are 25 gigs. Most flash drives you buy are going to be in the 4 to 64 gigabyte range, but there are larger, of course, and smaller. Your phone typically has anywhere from 8 to 16 gigabytes total, with about half of that being free because the other half's being used for apps and the operating system and everything else that your phone company puts on it. So think about that. You've got anywhere from about 4 to 8 gigabytes free on your phone unless you paid for a big upgrade for storage or if you have an SD card. And that's your window of what you can store. So for file size, what affects it, for images, you're looking at color depth, which basically how many colors does it have? Is it 2 colors or is it millions of colors like a photograph? The less colors, the smaller file. Resolution is how many pixels wide by high it is. And then the compression, which we talked a little bit about before with the JPEG and the PNG. If it's not compressed, it's going to be larger. For videos, you got the same things, color depth, resolution, and compression. That's still there. But then you're also looking at audio. The sampling rate of the audio, is it using good quality audio or kind of crappy audio? How many frames per second, which a lot of times you can't control, and then the length of the video. You know, because basically a video is just a set of frames all put together many times, like 30 frames a second times how many seconds, with a track of audio on top. And so that's why video files are so big compared to your typical, image files. So let's take a look at resolution. Resolution is basically an area problem. And if you can do basic elementary math, you're halfway there, right? 720 pixels by 480 pixels at that resolution, that D1 down there, that is 345,600 pixels. And each pixel takes a little bit of space, and each frame is going to be an image, right? So if it's 20 frames per second, it's that many pictures per second and that many seconds per minute, and so on and so forth. If you jump up to 2560 by 1920, which is what a lot of our iPhones and stuff will do, and decent cameras on our phones will do, you're jumping to 4,915,200 pixels. And so that is 3.5 times the dimensions, but it translates to over 14 times more pixels. So you can see where the file size would just get huge as you get larger, because it's an area. It becomes exponential in its growth. So resolution is a huge factor. So I recorded some video here at different resolutions, and you can see just the 10-second one. It's 0.8 megabytes for 320 by 240. This is like potato quality. It's horrible. It's a really grainy video, but it's not even a full megabyte for 10 seconds. And then it goes up to 3.5 megabytes at 720 by 480, which is a very sweet spot of resolution for uploading onto the web if you want really high compression. And then you got the really nice quality HD Blu-ray kind of quality at 1920 by 1080, and you're looking at 22 megabytes for that same 10 seconds. It gets more pronounced as you go into the 20-minute mark or 1 hour mark. And I'm highlighting the 20-minute mark here and the 380 because that's what we shoot for with EdTPA for our undergraduate candidates here at the College of Ed, because they have to try to get their file size really small for 20 minutes of video. Look down there at the size down and you'll see it in a visual way that might make a bit more impact for you. Just how much bigger the same 10 seconds or the same 1 hour is when you increase the resolution of the video. Look at that 1 hour. 1 hour of video, it's going to eat up 8.2 gigabytes of storage space at decently good, I mean, like, high resolution, HD quality, and your cameras can go higher than that. So it'll eat up the entire storage on your phone very quickly if you have the resolution set high. So the takeaway on this entire video, and I'm sorry we've gone on long, it's a pretty long video, but it's important, is that resolution is the biggest controllable factor in most of your recordings, because you don't always have the luxury of recording, choosing how long your recording is going to be. If it's a lesson you're recording, it's going to have to be an hour or so, right? You can't use to control the frame rate. You're recording in color, and you don't get to change that. And the audio is going to be whatever's coming in, into that device, because a lot of us aren't going to get like a professional recording device. So the one thing you really, really can control is resolution, and you should try to keep that in mind. If you have a choice in terms of what you record with, MP4 format's better. It's the most compatible. It's the easiest to use and edit. So that means stay away from Macs. I know that sucks, but Macs record at high resolution and record in a different format that makes it hard to edit or do anything with. Get a feel for how large your files are going to be before you record. Try recording a few things, see how big the file is, and so on. And then last thing is file extensions do tell you what type of file you're dealing with. The icons are determined by the program that opens it. And you should turn on file extensions on your computer. You should always be seeing the file extensions. It's just helpful. Okay, so I hope that was useful for you guys. I know that was a bit longer than our typical videos. And if you like this, make sure to hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and share this video on Facebook or with other colleagues and everything else you feel like might need it. And we will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.